Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next episode of As the Walk Returns. I'm here with my co-host, interviewer,
Something.
I don't know what we want to call you at this point.
Stand in.
Pretty much keep me on track person, Jared. So thanks for checking in with us today.
Great to be back.
Yeah.
It's always good to talk with you.
Thanks.
So today,
Yep.
we teased this out a little bit last time, but the tables have turned for you a little bit from the standpoint of not just being on the staff side of it, of senior living, but now you're actually walking in those shoes yourself from the standpoint of looking for a community for your mom.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Obviously that takes on a whole new level because now it's a much more personal experience. So how does it feel being on the other side?
Really stressful. I get it. Like, I understand why the families tend to come into the communities exhausted mentally, physically. I understand. I have a whole new level of appreciation for what they're going through. So it's an interesting dynamic. My mom has officially been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. And so that diagnosis rings very heavy in her mind. She's going through all of the emotions. She's known for a while now. She keeps saying there's something wrong. But we didn't want to put a label to it until we had all the tests, and we ran all of the tests possible, even though we have a pretty strong family history of this on her side. So once the test came back, now she's at the phase where she's angry, she's grieving, she's looking things up on the phone saying, well, I had a concussion once, did I do this to myself? What could I have done differently? So just going through all of that, lots of tears, lots of, we had the opportunity to go with her and my family last week to Disneyland. We went to California, and the irony is thick, but we're standing in line at Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, okay? Because she just wanted to go on that ride, and has
Why Mr. Toad's Wild?
I don't know. It was nostalgic, I guess. I don't know, but we're standing in line, and she is like angry. And when my mom gets angry, she just cries. So she stomps her feet. So she's stomping her feet. She's angry. She's crying. I'm like, okay, there's no crying at Disneyland. Why are we crying at Disneyland? What's happening right now?
This is really against the rules.
Yeah. No, there's no crying unless you're
written and unwritten rules.
I think I may have said that. I'm like, there's no crying at Disneyland. And she's just like, she just kind of just melted down, like, I don't want to be a burden on my family, and I don't want to live like this. And so all of those things, like trying to back it down into little pieces, like, okay, what is our mom? What can we do? What do we have control over today? We're going to have a good day today. That's all we can do right now. And then we're going to, take this in little pieces. So that was interesting to kind of go through some of those, emotional roller coasters with her, and they come out of left field. You just don't know when things are going to come at different times. So for me, I feel like I'm like, every time she calls me or texts me, it's like, okay, what's going to be the next thing that, she's grieving with. So kind of being on, I shouldn't say on edge, but just like the stress level or the alarm levels are pretty high right now with the family. I have a large family, so we have some split decisions in terms of where should mom live. Okay, should she be, close to brother, close to me? We're talking two different states. I'm adamant that when we move her into a community, she's in a place that if she does need memory care eventually, then we're only moving her once. I don't want to be moving her state to state or location to location.
Have that continuity of care.
Yeah, it's important to me because I want to have that continuity with the staff. And so my brother has done a tour. I went and did a tour this weekend. And it was interesting when my brother was on the tour with my mom, they put me on FaceTime. And so I'm asking all the industry specific questions, and I told the person giving us the tour, I'm like, Dude, I'm an insider.
Finish yourself.
Hold on. I'd be asking you all sorts of questions that I know the answer to. And so he's like, no, he was very gracious. He's like, thanks for telling me. So, I was like much more focused on the operations, tenure of the staff. I was actually looking at my own checklist and saying, okay, these are the things that are really important to me. And my mom was not focused on that at all. She's like, oh, I like the layout. I've got good sunlight. I can paint here, like nothing to do
Are
with
the
like
flowers pretty?
exactly. Where's the dining room? Nothing. What was she said? Yeah, just like it was mostly about painting. Can I put things on the walls? And I'm like, yeah, am I gonna have a roommate? No, so things I would never have even like thought of her thinking about. I was like, well, I guess that's important to you. So then when we did the next tour, it was my brother and my mom and I, and I'm coming into a community from somebody who operates buildings and has built buildings. And so I was trying to like, don't judge the building, don't judge the staff. Like, I got to think about what is important to mom right now.
Right.
Like, this is like not about me, it's about my mom. And so the staff was lovely to her, and she kept wandering off and like meeting residents. And she kept like, just introducing herself to self. So I'm just trying to like, get her back on the tour path as best as I can without being rude. And, but one of her concerns is, am I going to be lonely? Am I going to make friends? And I'm like, oh, mom, that's not going to be a problem for you. Run this place.
For you and I, when we get into one of these communities, I mean, it might be different.
Yeah, they're gonna have to like pull us out, with ropes. But so it was just really fascinating to see how they how the different tours went and what they focused on. There were some similarities, but not. It was almost as if it was like touring a hotel, which they were catering to my mom because that's what she was interested in. I wanted to know. I flat out asked, how long has the nurse been here?
Right.
And the one community said 2 years and the other one said 3 years. I'm like, okay, well, during post-COVID, that's a big deal.
Right.
How long's the executive director been here? And at the second community, they're like, we don't have one. I'm like, red flag. And they don't have a replacement because they asked me for referrals, which was very sweet. But like that's an issue because that is going to indicate a lot of change within the department heads and potentially the staff for quite a long time. There was also a management company change, which we'll get into all that later. But so for me, if I had to choose equally based on price, location, based on like the amenities that they offered, it is going to weigh much more in favor of one over the other, just because I know fundamentally what is going to happen in the next 6 months to a year.
But you mentioned those two things as key red flags for you.
Yeah, mom doesn't care.
Well, quite frankly, though, but that would have probably never even been something that
I wouldn't have thought to ask.
The normal person would have thought to ask, because they would have been focused on probably the same things that your mom was focused on.
Yeah, she wanted to know like what can she have for breakfast and what does the menu look like, and I'm looking at it and trying to get my brother to understand that, hey, who owns these communities and who operates these communities has as much of an impact, high level, than the caregivers on the ground,
right,
because they're the ones paying the bills at the end of the day. So asking some pointed questions, just as simple as, who owns your community?
Yeah.
How long have they owned the building? And if the staff can't answer that, or the marketing team can't answer that, well, that might be a red flag, because they really should know who the owners are. And is this something that they've been, owning the building, the same one for 20 years, and it's going to go to their children as an inheritance? Or is this something where, oh yeah, the owners are only here for a year and then they're going to turn around like a real estate deal and flip the building? So to have those kind of insights, we'll know, am I willing to go through as a family member and a resident that potential upheaval?
Right.
And it could go smoothly. I've done a lot of them. They generally come down to software issues, but it is change, and you're already making a massive change anyway. From my mom living on property and in a big house to probably 700 square feet. Like that alone is a lot.
Right.
Potentially relocating to another state full time. So then we have some division in the family in terms of when the right time for mom to be, placed is. And so our current thought, and actually the plan right now, is we're gonna try and give her one last great summer, at her own home with a companion several hours a day. And then that just puts the burden on me and some other siblings to care for her, during the evenings and make sure we've got all the meds and everything set up. So, there is no easy button here. There's no easy way to say, yeah, living into community is solving all my problems, because it doesn't.
Right.
But I have to get into the mindset of, again, this isn't about me. This is about what's in her best interest long term. And how can we get the whole family on the same page without feeling as much guilt and responsibility.
So now that you've toured a couple of these, and you've gone through this, like, and thought about it more from the consumer end of it, is there anything that jumps out in your mind as being particularly important that maybe previously you either knew was an issue, but having walked this road now,
yeah, I think
it's jumped out and increased its importance to you?
Yeah, I think for my mom in my particular situation, I think you have to look at your parent or loved one and say, okay, what is the issue? Is it mobility? My mom doesn't have a mobility issue right now. Like, she walked 20 miles in 2 days with us at Disneyland. So she's very mobile. So having a larger community at this time where she can navigate multiple floors or, have a larger apartment, that's probably more important. Than a smaller footprint. Now, at some point, we will need an even smaller footprint. For right now, I feel like that's important. So the apartment itself, the light, the common areas, the outdoor space, that was really important because she does like to go outside. She wants to get a kitten. I don't know if we're going to make that happen. I'm like,
so in other words, pet friendly is now what it is.
Yeah, she brought up the cat multiple times. And so I was like, okay, mom, kittens are great. We just keep trying to, like, we're going to
move past it.
We're moving past the kitten. But the communities were super kind. Like, yes, we're pet friendly, and we saw dogs. We saw, lots of pets around. So those to me are more somebody who's, pretty ambulatory, wants to be involved. If you're talking about someone who's an introvert, and doesn't really care about the activity calendar, they care more about the food, or they care about the transportation or the hands-on care, then yeah, you're going to have a whole different list of questions and expectations.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but obviously your mom had key things walking into the community. You had key things that were important for each of you. How do you balance those if those are in conflict?
Well, yeah. And after my brother was with me too, and he's like the family jokester. So he's introducing himself as, hi, I'm Eric and I'm a TikTok star. And I'm like, you are not. So trying to like manage.
I just want to be a fly on the wall sometimes for some of these tours, just because the family dynamics of everything could be entertaining.
Well, I even told the person giving us the tour, I'm like, I apologize on behalf of the entire family. Don't listen to anything he says. We are talking now, and we laughed the whole thing. So that's how my one brother is dealing with it, is like through humor and laughter, right, which to me is wonderful. And my mom responds well to that. But we all got in the car after the second tour and we sat down, and my mom was like, oh, they were very nice. And like, they gave her cookies, and she was like all about the cookies. And
cookies.
Yeah, they were pretty good. So I had to buy it. It was pretty good. I just said, Mom, how do you feel? She's like, well, she actually asked us, she goes, well, which one should I pick? And I said, no, Mom, which one do you pick? What do you like? And so she kind of in her mind was like, I like the first one because it had this and this, but the second one, was also good too. And then she said, well, you're the expert. What is your opinion? And so then I kind of added a little bit of more insight, into that, into where my decision would be, which aligned with hers, thank goodness. And my brother was he was kind of like, either will work, but I want to go with what Mom wants. And we still have to do a couple communities, in the state that we live. And I set her expectations, and I just said, Mom, when we go to tour, you've now seen, the Rolls Royce. Okay. Right. Like, so grateful you have the ability to do that. But when we go to these other communities, you need to set your expectations. They're going to be smaller. They're going to be a little older. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to have all the bells and whistles that this brand new, community has. And she's like, okay, thanks for letting me know. So it may or may not be an issue, but it's important, again, that we're setting expectations, not trying to slam one or the other. My brother did go and tour two other communities that I told him not to tour, but he did it anyway, without Mom, thank goodness. And he was just like, I would never in my life move my mom into one. And as someone from the industry, like, it broke my heart a little bit to know that, you know, maybe a couple bad players paint this brush on the rest of us. But it was important for him to see the stark difference. And just because they may have a great website, when you're walking around and seeing, you know, the actual care of the residents, and anyway, it was just not a good experience. And so he just ran out of there.
So I want to go back to one thing that we touched on very briefly earlier. So that way maybe you can explain this a little bit more as to what it means in a practical sense and why people should consider it. We talked about the continuity of care. Why is that important? Why, especially as it relates to potential memory support residents and so forth, in terms of why should families be potentially thinking about that or placing that as a high priority on their list?
Yeah, so the residents, there's the terminology that we use in the industry called transfer trauma, and it's real. I mean, even, you know, they say one of the most traumatic things you can go through is obviously death or illness or moving. It's stressful to move, even with all of your faculties. So when you're moving someone potentially to another state or another location, you're trying to figure out what's going to make the move, all of that, different people. It's like going off to college or going off to your first home. Like, everything's unfamiliar. And then when you're dealing with somebody that's, you know, dealing with a terrible disease, it just makes that even harder. Or maybe you're not dealing with something that's you know, memory loss. Maybe you've had a stroke and now you're, you know, maybe have a walker or a wheelchair. You know, it's just it's the perception of the loss of freedom, the loss of independence. And so they're grieving in some ways. You know, they're grieving like, this is probably the final stage.
Right.
And so what does that look like? And for me, the continuity to ensure that, yeah, mom may have to move into a different part of the community, but it's still under the same leadership. It's still under the same, you know, rules and responsibilities in the same management organization. To me, I know I'll have the continuity. Yeah, the same people. Her friends may, you know, be able to go over and visit if she's in a different part of the building. And not only that, but from the family perspective, to know that, look, it's the same thing, it just might be a different apartment. Like, we should have the same expectations as the family, and building those relationships with the staff, to me, is just as important, if not more critical, than mom building those relationships, because they will take care of mom no matter what, because that's what they do. But when you come in as a family member, the last thing I want to do is have an adversarial relationship with any of the staff, because I don't think they would, you know, like, intentionally do anything, but they'll be scared. And I don't want my mom to be, you know, one of those residents knowing that, oh, there's that daughter coming in here again, you know. So I want to make sure that those relationships are solid, so that when we do have to have hard conversations about whatever's going on with mom, like, it's done with a level of respect and love, and with the same goal, like, we're all here to take care of mom. We may come at it from different perspectives, but that's the goal. What are we going to do to take care of her?
So you touched on this, and I'm just going to ask it because now I'm just intrigued by it. But how do you kind of recommend people balance the engagement with staff, while also I'm assuming there is the other extreme of it, which is essentially being too aggressive, being a busybody, being up in their business, you know, and what's the appropriate balance there from the standpoint of appropriate accountability and contact and activity, but yet at the same point in time, not to throw a really hot potato or delicate subject
Great.
Here, put this in a real
short
nutshell.
Like, what does my inbox look like today? It's usually families with unrealistic expectations. You know, if you think you're gonna move, like I said before, I am under no illusion that moving my mom into a community is going to solve all of her problems. We'll solve all of her problems. It's not going to solve my problem. We're talking about a terminal illness here, or something else that will, you know, cause her to eventually pass away. But I guess I have to go in with my mindset of, I have to pick my battles. And if I'm going to pick my battles, it's going to due to probably safety issues. If they burn the chicken, okay, they'll feed her something else. Okay. If her laundry, if she's missing a pair of socks, okay, it happens at our own homes anyways. So thinking that you're going to go into a community and it's going to be a perfect Disneyland experience, it's not. So you have to really decide, where am I going to stand my ground? And you have to be united as a family in this, because if I were to ask my siblings what their expectations would be, they would be widely different. But if we can come to an agreement that safety is first, that she's getting the services that she's paid for, how, my mom takes a shower may be completely different than the caregiver, the steps that would be. But again, is it safe? Is she getting the care that she needs? Yes. We're just going to maybe go about it a different way and not nitpick the staff, because I think if you're working in this industry, you have to be coming from a good place. This is hard work. This is thankless work at times. And the number one reason staff work at these communities is for the residents. And the number one reason they leave is the residents, right? And usually that means the residents are being cruel to them, they're bullying them, or the family members are. So when they're coming in berating, saying, and I've had this happen, a daughter screaming at the top of her lungs because mom didn't have the appropriate, pillow chop in the middle. And sorry, somebody was coming in. And so,
This is real live TV.
This is real live. Yeah. I don't know if a resident's going to barge in. Maybe. We'll see. And the conversation wasn't about the pillow chop, it was about, she's grieving the fact that her mom's not going to be here probably in a year.
Right.
And she's just happens to be hyper focused on how the bed is made. And you have to, again, that daughter, it just wasn't about that. It's about bigger issues that she has to come to some resolutions on.
So obviously you have seen things, walking through this with your mom, you talked about how, wanting her to have one last great summer. This is a few months away. You're clearly have a runway here to be able to look at this. What about the family member who's just had a heart attack? They're about to be discharged from the hospital. Yeah. They need to move into a community. This is a 72 to 96 hour type decision, and they're looking essentially for a lifeline. Yeah. What are those key questions that you're like, okay, if this is a turn and burn type situation, it's just got to be different. And so, how have you seen families navigate that well in the past? Well, okay, or as well as can happen. Right. So they're coming off of a traumatic experience, right? Like my own father had a stroke. And so, you're reeling, from whatever that situation was, right? And then you're like, okay, we have more time with mom or dad or whatever. It's like, okay, now what do we do? So I guess if it were me and I was in that situation, I, like everybody else, you're on Google, you're like, best senior living communities, or, whatever, like you're screening the communities first based on websites, generally speaking. Hopefully they have their pricing listed. Like that is just such a pet peeve of mine. Like, why do you not list your pricing? Like, I can go buy a house online. It should be transparent, right? If they're not transparent with their pricing, I don't know, to me, that's a red flag. So can we afford it, first of all? Okay, if you can afford it, then that's going to give you many more options available. If you can't and you're price restricted, or maybe you're looking for, Medicaid or waiver funding, then your choices are going to be made for you, essentially. So you're going to want to find out, based on your price point, do you have 10 options? Do you have one option? That's going to be a big deciding factor. If you're lucky enough to have, 10 options available to you, I would start with how close are they to whoever is going to be the primary go-to for the community. I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. There's no way the community is going to talk to all 5 of us. No way. Like I am point person, and maybe my brother is the backup. So how close is this person to me if she lives near me? I would say probably 5 to 10 miles, depending on traffic, in your area. Is probably reasonable in case there was an emergency or you want to go take mom shopping or out to lunch or whatever. So proximity is going to be important. Price is going to be important. And then from there, maybe get a list of 2 or 3 that are going to meet those 2 criteria, and then get in there for either a tour, or if you can't get in there because you're dealing with literally like hospital discharge, they can do FaceTime tours or Zoom tours. Get them on, and you want to see some of the key areas of the community. You want to see, what the dining looks like, what you want to, what an apartment, what do they have availability? First of all, not everyone does. Right. So that also might limit your choices. Most of paperwork can be done, DocuSign, but you want a community, first of all,
that is willing to accommodate you the best they can. But if someone were to come to me and say, I need to move mom in tomorrow, that's probably not going to happen. There is, depending on your state, there are regulatory compliance issues from an assisted living and memory support perspective. There has to be nursing assessments in some states. There has to be certain doctor's orders filled out. So it's not just like check into a hotel. It doesn't work.
Right.
So I think just again, if you can't move someone in within, a few days, what is your backup plan? Are they going to come home with like a caregiver? You can usually get those pretty quickly, just to give us some breathing room. The last thing you want to do is make an emergency placement and then regret that decision because you didn't have the breathing time to really make a decision. And these are big financial decisions for these residents and these family members. Huge. I mean, we're talking huge. And so, I'm probably not going to buy a car or a house without looking at a few options and really doing the research to make sure it's that big of a decision.
So great, super good insights. Always enjoy it.
Thanks, Jared. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Apply this envelope in my face. I don't know.
We're gonna keep doing this, right?
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's live. We'll see if the caregiver with mom. We're at day 2, and I'm not home. So I've left the state. And she's home with the caregiver, breathing. I'm gonna call her. She's been home alone for an hour, so I need to call her.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we will do this again very soon, and very much appreciate chatting as always.
Thanks. Appreciate it.